Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is an absolute pleasure for me to be here. And first of all, I would like to thank very much SCONUL for their kind invitation. It is I'm particularly happy to be here because I normally talk to university leaders, rectors, vice-rectors, and not all that often I have the opportunity to talk directly to librarians. So it was very nice for me to be at the Plan S session before this to gain a little bit of more understanding of your dialogue. And actually, I modified a couple of slides after hearing your conversation to make it more personalized to you. I hope that it will be useful. Before I go into the explanations of what is the role of universities in open science, I would like perhaps to mention the key people from the UK that take part in the committees, in the several committees that we have in research and innovation at the European University Association. I don't know if you know that our association is the largest in Europe in terms of university numbers. We have 800 members across 46 European countries, so way beyond the EU. And 33 national rectors' conferences, among them, of course, UUK. And as such, they have a number of representatives in different committees. For example, we have the Research Policy Working Group that is recently nominated Catherine Gormley-Heenan from Ulster University. In the group on open science, we have Neil Jacobs from JISC Collections. In the Big Deal Negotiators groups, we have Liam Ernie, as well from JISC Collections. In the Innovation Ecosystems group, we have John Latham from University of Coventry. In the Council for Doctoral Education, we have Luke Georgiou, for a Vice-Chancellor from University of Manchester, precisely. And in the EUA Energy and Environment platform, we have Douglas Halliday from University of Durham. So you see that we have 7 key people in the UK that is taking active part in all the dialogue that we engage across Europe in a big partnership, as Pete indicated. Now, I would like to highlight a few context information that for EUA, as a European association, is very important. We are pro-open science. We are pro-sharing the knowledge generated through research while keeping ethics and integrity as a hallmark of the research process. We are in for transparency of the research process, but also of the process of its publication, and for easy and affordable ways to access that information. We are far from achieving this kind of ideal scenario. We are in a transition process. And we need more investment in open access business models. I will explain more about that. More investment in electronic infrastructure, that is essential. I'm not saying more policies, but enhancement of the implementation of policies fostering open access. I will talk about that as well. And last but not least, we need the engagement of researchers and the leaders in research organizations to make that happen. Without this, none of the conditions I said before would make us move towards open science. From the EUA perspective, we are focusing our attentions in 3 main aspects of those that I mentioned before. One is about the publishing models, how much they cost. I will tell you more about that. What are the open access policies that foster or not open access and eventually open science at institutional, national, or supranational level like Plan S? And last but not least, we also care for the quality of research published in open access journals, in any journal in general, and how this may affect the researchers' careers. So I will go into each of these 3 areas. I would like to take in mind, to have in mind as I go through these main areas on the important role of researchers and the fears and wishes and hopes that the transition towards open science generates in all of them, particularly the young researchers. There is a lot to do in clarifying the legal aspects, both not only in the new open access journals, as well as in the copyright. What does it mean for researchers that they give away their copyright to a publisher? It is amazing, but not many know exactly what it means and what are they getting into when they accept that copyright to be given away. They also fear about, okay, if I move to open access, open science, ideologically I think it's a good move, but what is going to happen with my authorship, for my data, for my research publication? Who is going to guarantee that nobody will use it or copy-paste it and will claim it as theirs? And last but not least, how it's going to affect my research careers. So everything I will say is always, for us from EUA, always an underlying worry of how this can affect researchers. If we look at one of the most recent data regarding of what is the percentage of publications worldwide that are open access, I would say that the picture is quite, well, unsatisfactory, to say the least. The gray area is the area of non-open access. And as you can see, even considering all different types of open access, there's more than 50% of publications worldwide that are not open access. And I will put all this into a European context because it's the context I know best, but that is worldwide. But one first data that can tell you something is that in Europe, 62% of universities have an institutional policy on open access, and 26% are developing one. Therefore, you can say that the landscape of institutional policies for open access in Europe is not that bad. Yet, as you can see, it doesn't correspond with a good level of open access. That is one of the first contradictions that we have currently in the system. I'm going to enter now into my three main areas. So let's go first to the juicy topic of publishing models and open access. I don't know if you're aware, but EUA has conducted 2 surveys on the cost of big deals around Europe. One was in 2016. It took us 1.5 years to make. The other was in 2018, which took us only 6 months to carry out. And the reason is that when we started in 2016, we didn't know Liam Ernie, for example, and the Liam Ernies of Europe. And it was very difficult to identify them, we being a European organization that was in contact with the National Rectors' Conference only. And it's not that they would not facilitate the names. Well, some of them had problems in identifying who these guys were. Second is, well, they wouldn't give us the information because they were bound by contracts that would forbid the giving away this information despite of our confidentiality policy. I will come again about that. But we managed to build a very good trusted network of Liam Ernies of Europe. And during the performance of the second survey on big deals, we had information almost immediately, much more shared, even those data that were confidential, because we became a trusted partner. And because we demonstrated that we could be that trusted partner by making public only the data that they agreed collectively that could be made public. So what you are going to see here is the data that they collectively accepted to publish. We have many more data that has remained confidential. So in this second survey, we had 31 national negotiating consortia responding. We focus on Elsevier, Springer Nature, Taylor and Francis, Wiley, and American Chemical Society. That selection of publishers was made together with this community of negotiators. And what I'm going to explain is data collected that refers to 2017 and 2018. So here, this is a first graph showing the main points of concern for higher education institutions and for research institutions across Europe, across these 31 systems. They are from 30 countries, 31 systems from 30 countries. And you can see cost control and cost reductions are the most important concerns, as well as inclusion of open access policies, policies in subscriptions. Also important, maintain the content journals across contracts and ensuring that there are early termination there are rights still keeping after early termination of contracts. There are other factors, and I can leave this for your attention after the conference. Now, the big figure. We came with this magic figure, 1 billion euro, total expenditure in these 5 big publishers. 1 year of expenditure, 31 national systems. 1 billion euro in 2018 at a 3.5 rate increase. And as I'm sure you know, universities or research centers do not necessarily have 3.5% increase yearly, as the price of the subscriptions have. And that 1 billion, although it looks big, it is a complete underestimation. It doesn't include all APCs. Actually, it only includes a minor fraction of APCs. It doesn't include other large publishers that are also important. It doesn't include all the contracts, because we spoke with one consortia in every country, but there are countries with more than one consortium negotiating on behalf of universities and research centers. And of course, it doesn't include other individual contracts that universities or research centers themselves may have. Therefore, you can guess, we could do a contest of by how much you would be willing to multiply this 1 billion. I would add a factor of 6 or 7 at least. And out of this 1 billion, we can estimate that 72% is borne by universities. Here's a big message. Universities seem to be the largest client. Therefore, where is the key to change the system? I would say it's universities. Another, I think, important factor of this 1 billion is that it's all public money. There is no private money. So you can even multiply more money that goes into the hands of publishers by all the private contracts they have. Whether it's paid by universities, by their governments, by a mixture of them, every country organizes the payment in a different way, but in the end, it all comes from taxes, all our taxes. And now, when you look at what information can they make public, you can see that in 61% of the countries, there are transparency laws that would allow them to make this information public. Yet, the surprise was that they didn't even know, some of them, that they have transparency laws in their country by which they can make this information public. So, another contradiction in the system. Sometimes we have the mechanisms, but we don't use them. Now, regarding open access provisions, I will highlight only these 2 numbers. Currently, there are no provisions for open access in 55% of the contracts. Yet, 64% expect to have them in the future. So you can see that there is a wish, at least, to change the way these contracts are set and renegotiated. When asked if the subscriptions would include APCs, currently only 19% of the contracts include APCs in their subscriptions. Yet, in the future, 65% would like to include APCs. So you can see the field is ready for a change. Provisions for double dipping. 67% say they have provisions for double dipping. Yet, only 31% have monitoring systems to know whether this happens or not in reality. Another pending tasks for the sector. monitoring systems. I already said that because this is just the detail about the transparency laws, but I feel so strongly about it. I said it before, it was time. Now, here is another interesting graph for you, I think, is to illustrate the share of costs among these, the 5 publishers that we interviewed, 6 publishers. Well, so 56% is Elsevier. That is kind of, I would say, coherent with the previous survey that we can't really use to compare on an equal basis, but in the previous survey we got the fraction for Elsevier contracts was 65, and this one is 56. So we can say virtually around 60. It would be a fair number to assess the strength of each publisher. The others follow very far away. Wiley, Springer, even less, Taylor and Francis, or even American Chemical Society, although they are said that they are very tough negotiators. But you can see here what is the relative weight. Now, this is an interesting graph. We took all the expenditure in every country, conveniently anonymized, and we divided by the GDP per capita to get a sense of how much every country spends in relation to their GDP. The way to read this figure is how many people have to work in a year to pay for the costs of the country. So here is C2 that needs almost 3,000 people for 1 year working to pay all this. Or 8 or C7 that needs only 500 people. So that shows how different the landscape in Europe is. And there are all sorts of reasons for that. Some of them is true that we don't have all data in the country. But some others is that some countries pay too much and some countries pay too little. And that is for historical reasons. That is a factor that I heard today in the session on Plan S, that there are strong historical conditions in your previous contracts that kind of mark the price of the future contract. But I think that another call for the community, get away from the historical reasons. Let's count what really is the cost in the system. So I will close this chapter by summarizing the wide coverage of European countries and the different situations on big deal negotiations, as you just saw. Many countries would like to combine subscriptions and APC, yet there's no really advancement on that. There are some publish and read models, but they are not the norm. I will come back about the publish and read models, but here I would like only to say that in those countries or regions that you see that there are transformative agreements where there are more APCs included in the subscriptions or different models of publish and read, these happen only when you have university leaders genuinely engaged in the negotiation process, either because they are sitting on the table together with the other librarians to negotiate jointly, or because they are kind of orchestrating to some level of orchestration in the back. But always when you see a transformative agreement emerging as a successful end of a negotiation, you may take it for sure that the university leadership and the research and the leaders of the research centers have been behind that negotiation. I will now go to the institutional policies. I said before that I don't know if we need more policies. Well, let me qualify that. We do need more policies, but I'm not so sure whether we only need more or we just need reinforcement of these policies. Because at the institutional level, I will show you now data across Europe from 321 institutions from 36 countries that they responded the survey last year. But you will see the results. They are not very different from the similar surveys in the previous year. And if we add the universities that have been responding to this survey for the last 4 years, we have a total of 550 universities. So it is a really fair landscape of the situation in Europe. This is the breakdown of countries that replied last year. You can see here United Kingdom, could be better, could be worse. That's for you until the next survey. And this is, well, this is just for your information. It's about the profile of the institutions. Most of them are comprehensive institutions. Specialized institutions refers to universities of technology or universities of arts, etc. So that is just background information that you can look at after the presentation. Now, sorry, that is, okay. So here is the elements of these institutional open access policies, the main elements. The dark blue is mandatory, and the middle blue is optional, and the light blue is not included or not relevant. So you can see that there is 60% of institutions have their policies mandatory, but also 50% are optional, not necessarily mandatory. And yet most of them manage to make it not part of the internal evaluation of researchers. And that has a clear link with Plan S. Because I think that this is what we can say, I hope, an old picture, or it will be an old picture soon enough. Because why universities could not reinforce these elements? Why could not make it part of the assessment of research careers? Precisely because the funding part was not there. So I hope that this will become old pretty soon, despite all the difficulties in Plan S. I know there are many. Similarly, we can see that only 23% of universities have targets as to how much they want to achieve open access. You can see it's quite limited, as opposed to almost 75 that had policies in place, but only 23% have targets for access. Also, there is many of them have institutional repositories, and many of them perceive an increase in the deposit rates after implementing open access policies. So you could see from this graph that actually policies do work when they are reinforced. For the sake of time, perhaps I will skip this one, I will skip this one. Now, this one is important because this synthesizes the actions that are needed to foster more open access to research publications. It may come as a surprise, maybe in the UK context, but not in other contexts, that one of the very important priorities is activity to raise awareness about open access and their implications. Incentives for researchers, legislative frameworks, guidelines providing clarification. That is a non-negligible number. It's 80%, between 70% and 80% of universities in Europe think like that. Therefore, it's quite worrying if we are advocating for open access, but they are in high demand of this type of activities. The situation is even more worrying when we talk about research data management, and even more when we talk about research, open research data. I will skip this one. There is, just here to see that when we talk about research data management policies, only 21% of universities have these policies in place. If you remember, for open access to research publications, it was 75%. If we go to research open access to research data, only 13 have policies for open access to research data. So this offers kind of state-of-the-art in the system at European level. We also ask them what do they think they need, what sort of skills they need in their institutions to make open access to research data or simply research data management a more normal activity. And you can see the light blue is what is needed, was very much needed. Legal skills, technical skills in the area of data management, in the area of e-infrastructures, researchers, support staff to provide knowledge at national level, or support staff to provide advice to researchers. So there is a high demand on skills to make open access and open access to research data as well a reality. I will skip this one. Okay, I closed the second part of my presentation about reminding you that what I said, 62% universities have open access to research publications, open access policies to research publications, only 21 to research data management, or only and even only 13 to research data. Yet, 89% of universities have repositories, 75% universities declare that there's been a rate or an increase in the deposit rate after the open access policies. And in terms of monitoring the number of publications in open access, 69% do that for green open access, and 49% do that for gold open access. Last but not least, I will say a few words about the scholarly quality of articles and research assessment. We have talked about the costs of publications. We have talked about the institutional policies in open access. But I think that one of the key factors to really move on towards open science is to make the way research is assessed and put into value evolve. EUA has published last year in 2018 its roadmap on research assessment in a transition towards open science, making some considerations on what was needed in the system to evolve. Because we identified that the predominance of the journal impact factor and other similar indicators as the main indicator to measure the quality and the activity of a researcher is becoming far too reductionist in the current system. That journal impact factor measures exactly the impact of the journal, not the impact of an article itself. And after all, we are all witnessing that the traditional article type of publication is becoming less important in the sense that there are many other ways to make research results available, and not to say about research data sets. So the way researchers communicate their results is expanding. Therefore, the system based on journal impact factors and other similar indicators puts the system into too much of a constraint for the researchers themselves. So those who complain about the evolution of the system, okay, they may be right in their own context, but when you look at the system as a whole, that worry doesn't hold. It has to change with care, but it has to change. So we published early this year a report on reflections on university research assessment and what needed to be changed. This is available in the website. It was reviewed by several key people in research assessment, and we celebrated. We organized a workshop in Brussels on 14 May. It was the first workshop that we organized to know about institutional policies regarding changing systems for research assessment. So we welcome a number of practices, and I'm sorry this cannot be yet in a more schematic way, but we are still working on the recommendations, so they are still broad. It was very clear by the people present in that workshop, university rectors and vice rectors, deans of graduate studies, funders, Plan S, also Plan S delegates, etc., that we need a concerted effort uniting researchers, universities, research-performing organizations, funders, etc., because we are talking here about a systemic change that no one actor can do on its own. And we need a structured dialogue of all actors involved in research. Here it is the reflection that collects that researchers, depending on the field in which they are in, may see some priorities or some cultural ways of doing and communicating research, and we agree that this all has to be taken into account. At the same time, we need to make sure that we push for an opening of the way the system, the research system is assessed and scientists rewarded. Last but not least, I would like to mention this joint statement presented by European University Association and Science Europe, committing precisely to unite at least these two main actors across Europe to work together to ensure that the current system evolves in a sensible way. Therefore, to close my speech, I would like to mention a series of activities that the EUA is performing in this sense. Oops, sorry. I already presented a little bit the papers that we produce, the surveys, and I would like to let you know that we are conducting a study on publish and read models is carried out by Technopolis and Van de Voren Consultancy, because we wanted to create a series of scenarios that negotiators with publishers could take as a tool to explore new formula, new options to negotiate with publishers. And normally, this study should be completed by December this year. We are also engaging in lots of dialogues. Not only Science Europe, we are members of the Open Science Policy Platform, the European Open Science Cloud, the Max Planck Digital Library, etc. And currently we are developing a conference on incentives and rewards for researchers that will take place in Amsterdam on 15 November this year. And last but not least, our main outcomes are statements, policy positions, recommendations, and above all, support to universities, our main constituency. But indirectly, we are also supporting the national negotiating consortia. So, to close my presentation, I would like to highlight these 5 main points. We need more transparency of costs in the research system, research, publications, and the legal frameworks. We need to make the research assessment exercises evolved, as we just said, especially in a context of open science. We need a reinforcement of the implementation of open science policies. I think that Plan S, for example, is a step in the right direction, and it may not be the only one. There are other plans emerging, more bottom-up through researchers, like the Plan U, and the others may be in the future. I think this Plan S should be like setting pave the road for other Plan S's or whatever we call them that would really foster open science. Very importantly, not to be forgotten, although it has not yet been a focus of attention for EUA, is the investment in electronic resources, in research infrastructures at national and supranational level. And, as I said, never to forget, the engagement of researchers is of utmost importance, and so is the engagement of university leaderships and leaders of research institutions. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Lidia. We do still have a few minutes if there are some questions from the audience. If I could, we've got a couple of roving mics, so if you would like to ask a question, please stick your hand in the air and we'll get a mic to you as soon as we can.
James Anthony Edwards, Exeter. Thinking about Plan S, and you talked about cohesion and working across Europe, Plan S gives wriggle room to research funders in how they exactly implement it. This may be a loaded way of asking it, how optimistic are you that we will get a coherent, cohesive approach? And to what extent do you think it matters whether we have a coherent, cohesive approach between funders?
Yes, thank you for your question. Optimism. Yeah, well, I think that coherence, it will take some time, because all different national settings come from their own histories. There is a lot of historical reasons, not only in the costs of big deals with publishers, that we need to get rid of. I think that we must accept that there will be incoherences in the system for a while, whatever that while is in terms of timeline. I think that what must prevail is the ultimate goal is really open access to research publications and research data, because that's what matters for society and what matters for science. And in between, we will have perhaps some disruptions, some people who are unhappy, of course. But that's the situation today. Not everybody is happy with the current system either. It's just that these voices are not very vocal. But the important things are, we are investing a lot of public funds in research. Research is a public good. Therefore, it's only fair that publishers, I'm not talking about learned societies. As you can have noted, I have not mentioned them because I don't want to. We have not studied their situation, and we understand it's completely different. Yet they do not represent the huge amount of money that the big publishers represent. So therefore, this situation is unsustainable. It has to change, and it has to change in many different places.
If there are no more questions, Lydia, you staying for lunch with us? Mm-hmm. So Lydia will be over lunch if there are any particular questions that you don't feel you want to raise in a room full of people. But if you could just join me and thank Lydia in the normal way once more. Thank you.